I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that well the sculptor those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And upon the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains around the decay of that colossal wreck. Boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." My name is Daniel Pasco, and this is a talk about passion and hubris. So, a funny thing happened on the way to the conference. First of all, Apple announced the Apple TV and the SDK for it. And we talked about it, and we decided that we really needed to pounce on the opportunity. So I put an email together to the team called 28 Days and said we had 28 days to come up with a version of one of our products, NetNewswire, that would be set up for the Apple TV. So it's called NetNewswire Today. And this is not an advertising pitch, I'm just talking about what we've been doing. And it's a very targeted user experience because of the constraints that we had. So it's the Today view for existing users, and it'll let you just sit down and browse the news from your sync account. And it's actually turned out to be a really great experience. So we're really enjoying it. And so we've been very, very focused on trying to get that out the door. So I figured I would work on that and then shift gears and get ready for this talk. But life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. So one thing that's kind of interesting about NetNewsWire is there's a common library called NetNewsWire Core that all of our apps are based on. And it handles the sync, the feed parsing, the data model, all that stuff. And in the sync code, we actually use certificate pinning for part of our security model. And we use a local copy of our cert so that we have a public key that we can use to talk to the server. Now, some of our clients, depending on their security model, most people will just renew their certs when they expire. But some of our clients actually, because they're handling a lot of credit card data and people are trying to hack them, they'll periodically change the cert entirely. And so there was an unrequired check to make sure that the cert hadn't expired. But honestly, even expired, it would have worked fine. So this was a decision that was made that wasn't communicated up to the rest of the team. We updated the cert on the server, but we didn't update the cert on the app because we didn't think we needed to. And it expired. It also turned out that that check included an assert. And somehow, and we're still trying to figure this out, we don't know if it's an Xcode migration problem or what, because the flags are all set right. The app shipped with live asserts. So I don't know if you know what an assert is, but it's basically a debugging thing that you use so that it's one of those, this should never happen kind of things, and when you're testing the app, it'll blow up, and so you've got to stop and fix it right away. So what happened was we rolled out the universal update for our iOS app. We have Mac, iPad, and iPhone. And they all burst into flames Thursday night. That was awkward, particularly since I've been an evangelist for QA to the community and the industry for a while. And it was really distressful, and there was a major firefight. I wrote up an assessment of it. It's on my Medium site if you want to look at it. But really, while I was doing this write-up, I just kept thinking of this over and over and over again. So this is a Swedish bachelor party. So something going on here. And then he gets thrown a chicken. And then he runs through a fire. And that's the asserts right there. And just, But it really was like this constellation of things that all happened together. I just need to see the fire scene one more time. I'm sorry. While I was working on this, I was just laughing my butt off. There we go. There's the asserts. Okay. There, but for the grace of God, go I. So the cert issue was a visibility problem. It was a communication problem. Our clients, when we work with them, they have institutionalized rolling out the cert updates. The sync service is a new part of our business, and so that was something that we were still getting formalized. We felt pretty good about the server side, but obviously this is another issue. The next thing that happened was the iOS app got approved pretty quickly. The Mac app, however, was rejected. And it was rejected, keep this between us, it was rejected because it included a popular sites page that had links to popular sites. So if you're a new user and you're just getting started, there's like ESPN, Daring Fireball, that kind of thing. And the reviewer was concerned that this was copyrighted data, and they passed it off to Apple Legal, and they went, deny, deny, deny. And so I ended up staying up late on Monday night, writing an essay on how RSS works, filing an appeal. We had it back in the store on Tuesday, no problem. Wednesday, I flew here. So my original plan was to work on this talk Thursday night, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And Saturday is actually my son's birthday. But what actually happened, fire, 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 and then write up an appeal. So this is not at the level of polish that I would like. So just bear with me while we go through this talk, and please accept my apologies. So this is my talk. The joys of quality assurance. And I have to tell you, this is not a talk I ever thought I would actually give, because I'm not a QA person. I spent most of my career despising traditional QA. And we had a journey, we learned some things, and I want to share them. As far as our company is concerned, if you don't know anything about us, we're headquartered in Seattle. We started in 2007. I'd had a previous company. I wanted to do Mac development. So a couple of my friends and I got together, and then the iPhone came out. We went nuts, focused on that. We're 55 people now and growing, and we've branched out into Android, responsive web, and emerging tech like the TV as well. We're very remote friendly, so we're based in Seattle, but we've got people all over North America and some people in Europe as well. And we offer a variety of services. Testing is one of them. We have a lot of clients. You can go to our website if you want to see who they are, but I usually can't talk about any of the things that we've worked on. But the only project I can talk about publicly is Inspirato, which is like Airbnb for the super rich. It's like the gold watch people would be doing this. It's a $25,000 a year membership, and they have phenomenal content. So what we did was we worked with them to make something that was a truly immersive, tailored experience. We added natural language search, so you have progressive disclosure as you're going through this thing. So you have options for what you want to do, where you want to go, the time frame, and then it can like expand out into like a formal calendar and that kind of thing. Anyways, it was a gorgeous app. We enjoyed working on it, and it required a lot of testing and a lot of development. Here, we might be known better for some of the apps we've acquired and worked on, which are Kaleidoscope 2, NetNewswire, and Versions. And as far as I can tell, we have evolved one of the best QA teams in the world. I would like to find other people who feel the same way we do about this, but so far I haven't seen it. But I want you to be able to say the same thing. I'm not interested in being the best. I want to change the industry. So the first question is, what is quality assurance? Like, are QA people completely bridle at the name? They call themselves testers. I think of them as analysts, but they think that quality assurance is a joke. And there's a lot of debate about what it means. What does it mean to your team? What does it mean to your customers? And why should any of us even care about it? Well, one of the things I like to say is QA is something that you normally associate with big companies, with big IT groups and that kind of thing, and it's not just for large companies. And I want to talk about that. So, start out my experiences with quality assurance. The classic indie one-person shop, they do their own QA. I mean, this is the legendary months and months of polish. So they spend a long period of time in development, and then they switch hats, and they just work on lovingly polishing and testing everything that they can. So they're doing their own QA, and there's probably nobody better. They're experts at it. And it's a time-consuming process, but it's extremely effective. It doesn't necessarily scale well for a larger company, and not everybody's willing to spend that kind of money to do it. But when you're basically only covering your own costs, you can pick how long you want to work on it, and you'll usually see a return on that. QA in business is a different story, and apologies to Mike, but I also had this in here. So this was my take on QA for about 14 years. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. Most of the QA people I worked with actually made the job harder, and it was for a lot of reasons. For one thing, the caliber of people they were hiring for QA was a lot lower than they were hiring for design and development. And a lot of times they were focused on just verifying the requirements and that kind of thing and nothing more. It was like, okay, I just need you to run this thing. And so it was considered to be not as skilled a job and lower paying and lower caliber people. Most of the time, the testers were actually physically removed from the developers so they wouldn't annoy the developers. They were working almost solely from outdated documentation. And they had a very, very poor understanding of the application requirements and were still trying to get caught up while we were trying to wrap things up. And frequently, like an appalling lack of platform expertise. They would open bugs on things that were just like how iOS worked. And they didn't understand that. And like I said, much lower caliber than the design and the test teams. And they filed a lot of bugs that were noise. So we'd have to go back and forth and argue with them about it. Institutionally, QA is commonly regarded as a cross to bear. People know they need to do it. Really big companies know they need to do it. They may not really know why they need to do it. And a lot of times when you talk to them about QA, they're obsessed with keeping the costs down. So they're looking at offshoring, they're looking at automation. And a lot of times what they end up doing is they end up repurposing QA as a project management artifact. So you've got all the requirements that need to be done, and they're like, what percentage of these tests are passing right now? And they're really only just trying to exercise it and make sure it does what it's supposed to do. And one of the things I'd say to that is that there aren't any silver bullets. Unit tests are good, but they're not enough. Automated testing is good, but it's not enough. And both of these things are pretty brittle if you're making a lot of changes in the code. You spend a lot of time maintaining those. And simple requirements verification definitely isn't enough. I reached the point where I was just fed up with the entire thing. And by 2007, I was completely opposed to having any kind of QA involvement at all. I figured if we were going to spend money on it, we'd be better off just piling it up and setting it on fire. And I mean it, because what would happen is it became this huge randomizing factor that was actually a massive drain on the company. Strong net negative with no results. But in 2009, we had something that changed. We hired Chris Clark, who was our first dedicated professional designer. And he had an interesting process. He was always looking for some way he could help. And so when we got through with the design process, he would switch gears and he would start just nitpicking the crap out of the app and opening bugs on it, making sure we were implementing everything well, and just doing all the testing he could do. And because he designed it, he knew what to expect. He knew what he wanted out of it. And he would just flog us mercilessly. And it was awesome. And it really raised the bar on our work. And we realized, like, hey, this is good. Like, if testing was like this could be better. This person is sophisticated. They are informed. They know what's going on. And by 2010, we actually wanted more. And we had an opportunity when one of the clients we'd been working with for a while said, hey, this go around, can you provide us any QA? And thought about it, and we were like, yeah, let's try and do this, but let's try and do this in a new way. I don't know if anybody here has ever read The Elenium by David Eddings. It's a really good fantasy series, but they have all these knights called the Pandian Knights. And there's this older guy named Kurik, who's a squire to the main character. And Kurik is awesome. He is like one of the best people there. And the knights are like, why haven't you made him a knight a long time ago? And Sparhawk said, I tried, he refused. And he felt that his place was as a squire. He had a familial obligation to Sparhawk's family to do this. And so he actually considered himself to be slightly better than the knights in the first place. And I was like, that's what I want in a tester. So we put an ad out, and I wanted somebody who would just torment us. And I got an email from John Gruber. And he said, I know this guy, Nat Irons, he's applied, you should hire him. So we did, because we're not stupid. So for the first time, we actually had QA that was on par or sometimes better than the designers and the developers that we had. It worked. Really amazing. So far better than I could have expected, actually. I mean, I had no idea what we were in for, but Nat was a monster. If anybody's read Dune, it's like having Thufir Howard on your team. This guy's like a mentat. He's now our QA director. So Nat, it found a terrifying amount of legitimate bugs. You'd just be like, where did this come from? You know, and like, he looked at this in ways that we never would have considered because he knew the platform. He was very, very detail-oriented, and he just hammered on our stuff. And he understood the product as well as anybody else, and he could really advocate for us, anticipate problems, and raise them to our attention, like just even at the design phase, so that we were able to take that and use it in our work. And he hugely raised the quality bar for what we were doing. And people noticed it. One of the things that, I have a manifesto I wrote a couple months ago I'm going to publish in the next couple of days. And one of the things that I said in this manifesto is that we are founded on the Vitruvian ideals. Vitruvius was a Roman architect, and he said that products should possess firmitas, utilitas, and venusitas. And we translated that to solid, useful, and beautiful. And Nat has been instrumental in helping ensure that these things are rock solid. The time went on, and Nat helped us grow the team. And eventually, if anybody has seen Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we started to really think about things in terms of operatives, which might be the developers and the designers, and the analysts. And the show has gone to great lengths to demonstrate how critical the analysts are to what they do. The operatives are completely dependent on them because they tell them where to apply force, where to go, they bail them out of situations. And they've had episodes where the operatives, where the analysts weren't available, and it really left them in the lurch. Sometimes I think of this as kind of like a sniper and a spotter pairing. You've got somebody who's telling you where to focus your energy to get the best result. So in more of a classical QA cycle, a lot of our clients do this. Sorry for the low res on this. I did not have time to prepare better graphics for this. What would happen is a dev would fix a bug and submit the fix, and then they would roll out a formal build, and then the testers would test against that. And it could be like twice a week. And so the dev would do the work, say, okay, job well done, move on to the next thing, and be totally mired in something else. And then the tester would come back with a bunch of regressions, or this isn't completely implemented. And so what would happen is the dev would have to completely context switch to take this stuff on, or it would just get bumped back further and further for them to get to. And what we do, which works a lot better, is we pair QA with the dev. The QA people are fine with pulling the source directly from Git. If it's a branch, they can pull out the branch. And so basically the dev will say like, okay, it's done, take it. They pull it out, they just hammer on it for a few hours and then come back and say, it's good, or okay, I found these bugs you still have to fix. And so we kind of stamp out and smooth out the problems very, very quickly. And so we can move very, very fast. And then for formal channels, what ends up happening is if there is an official build later, they'll go back and re-verify that the fix works as expected in the build, and then we close the ticket. So our testers are informed. They are embedded in the product teams, and they are involved in almost every aspect of what they do. They are partners in this. They work very, very closely with the developers and the designers. They participate in the product definition, and they participate in design reviews, which is really important because they actually have been very instrumental in identifying places where we might paint ourselves into a corner. And so at that conceptual stage, they're very, very good at just kind of wringing things out and making sure we're on the right track. And this is probably the most telling thing. They are in very, very high demand with our developers. And historically, there tends to be kind of this cat and dog animosity, the eternal war between test and developers. And we've had situations where we've had to pull testers off of our product team to go help a client who's in a crunch. And I thought I was going to have a mutiny on my hands. I got this impassioned email from one of my employees saying, like, we need this person back here. Like, we can't do this all ourselves. There are going to be bugs we can't find, and we need one, if not two people back immediately. And I think that's probably the best validation of what we do, is that the developers, there's a trust there and there's a necessity that they really rely on. So when I've been talking about this, I've kind of alluded to it a little bit before, you have somebody who's doing requirements verification, you'd think the quality bar would be set one way. If you have somebody just doing like full-on analysis, you might think that the bar would be raised somewhat higher. But what I've actually found, particularly because of the hiring requirements for if this is what you're doing, if you're just doing requirements verification and hiring somebody who can just do requirements verification, they end up being a serious drain on the company. You need somebody who is just really on the ball. And like I said with Nat, when you actually have somebody who can really attack this in an analytical way, they become a huge force multiplier for what you're doing. Everybody works more effectively, and it goes a lot better. Because great QA produces a more effective and a happier team, for sure. And it results in a lot of work because you get a lot of tickets. You can decide which ones you need to fix, though. It exposes a lot of your mistakes, and sometimes that can be hard for people, but real pros embrace it because they know that these people are just as passionate about making a great product as they are. And they know, like I said, they want to make something the best they can. And business owners obsessed with making great things appreciate it too, because we all want our work to be the best. I want to talk about coverage for a minute. So Cherie is one of our senior testers, and people have said before, like, oh my gosh, you're just totally breaking this app in all sorts of different ways. She said, I don't break the app, I dispel notions. And so what she does is she sees what's there, finds it, and puts a light on it. So let's take this rectangle. Let's say it's the space that's the totality of all the bugs that actually exist in your app. And if you're just going through requirements verification, you've got a test plan, you're going through and testing everything, all the nominal paths, you might cover that much. It's in a regular space. The scary stuff is over there. Those are the unknown unknowns. So you catch bugs in exploratory testing. You catch bugs that you wouldn't normally find doing nominal testing. And there are a lot of tools they use for this. Testers have a mnemonic called I sliced up fun. These are all different areas you can hit, all different things that you can approach for doing this, like network outages, messing with the inputs and that kind of thing. But when you're looking at the question of like, does your app work? There are all these other factors that come up, and a lot of these things cause crashes. Voiceover. Are you sending data in the clear? Is anybody looking at a network analyzer to see what's going on? What happens when you put an external keyboard in? Emoji kills a lot of things. Regressions, that kind of thing. There's a lot of stuff there, but I have to tell you, this is the stuff I know about. This is the outline for Cherie's template test plan. And this is seriously comprehensive. These are just the headings. I eliminated all of the text, but these are all the areas that she looks at for any app. And that's available online. And if you go through some of my QA blog posts, I've linked to it because it's phenomenal. And we want to share it with people. So why do we care about this stuff? Well, what we're doing is we're looking for ways in which the app will fail, because we don't want the app to fail on the people who are using it. And QA is a vital part of creating a great user experience. Like I said, that contributes to the solid part of the experience. You, Kenny Loggins. You've got the bugs caught in exploratory or off nominal testing. And then you got this area. The crasher that we had with NetNewswire I consider to be in this area. There was a time factor, there was a communication factor, and eventually the clock ran out and something was exposed that we did not pick up in regular testing. You can be sure we changed our test plans and we changed our operational plans too. But as Charles mentioned, I used to be a rocket scientist and I worked on several spacecraft. I did flight software on board, electrical power system control, and a lot of ordnance deployment, firing the parachute mortar, releasing the heat shield and that kind of thing. And this is called the Mars Polar Lander. So that's actually my friend, Jeff. I went to college with him. But so the spacecraft has these lander legs. And when the lander legs are deployed, snap out. There's 3 of them. They actually go 300 milliseconds apart, so I almost had a heart attack the first time it went because I only saw one leg for a minute. But there's another piece of software called the touchdown monitor, and each of these legs on the pad has a touchdown sensor, and when it's compressed, it sets off a signal. And so the touchdown monitor actually monitors those things during entry, descent, and landing. And when they get compressed, as soon as there's 2 compressed, it says, we're on the ground. And so it issues the order to my code to turn off the rocket engine. So what nobody realized, like they tested the leg deployment, they tested the touchdown monitor. Separate tests, weeks apart, in the high bay clean room. What nobody realized was that when the legs were deployed, there was a cuff that made a hard stop. And so when the leg deployed, it hit that, and this transient vibration happened that strobed the touchdown monitor. And 2 of them strobed, and the touchdown monitor went, we're here, bam! And it fell 500 feet to the planet and crashed and was destroyed instantly. That sucked. So they actually figured that out and went back through the ATLO data and saw the transients on the original high bay test we did for the deployment. And what they did was they made 2 changes to the code for the next lander. So the first one was they deployed the legs and then they cleared those registers explicitly. And they also added a persistence check to make sure that not only did it see it, but it stayed on. And that one did just fine. And they caught the transients again. So this is the Mars Climate Orbiter. This is a much more notorious one. There's something called the small forces file that is data that's collected for thruster pulses and that kind of thing while it's cruising around the sun on its way to Mars. And what happens is these jet pulses are to keep it stable. And they can also extract out the current mass and the moments of inertia of the spacecraft from measuring these things. So they use that to update their model so that they can figure out what kind of coefficients they're going to use for different propulsion maneuvers and that kind of thing. And JPL was expecting it in metric, and they were using foot-pounds. Now, what's interesting, it's one of those Forrest Gump brushes with fame kind of things, was I was working in ops at the time, and the first thing they asked me for was to extract the small forces file on this thing. So there's a tool. I ran it. I looked at it. It was a huge file full of doubles. There was just no way to tell anything from it. But anyways, what happened was JPL took this and said, the data looks kind of squirrely, but all right. They ran it through, came up with new coefficients, loaded them up to the spacecraft, and during aero capture, it went in about 20% of the altitude it was supposed to. Much thicker atmosphere and was just incinerated. That sucked too. So the thing that comes out of this is that quality assurance is impossible. There's always going to be some hole in your armor that's out there that can bite you. So why bother? Like I said, what happened with us after NetNewswire was like, well, that just got us to the point where we were going to redouble our efforts to work even harder. And it's kind of like a couple of classic sayings. No plan ever survives contact with the enemy. Eisenhower, this was an interesting one I found while I was researching this. In preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. You take every precaution you can, but when you hit the ground, something's going to happen that's going to be a wild card. But you prepare, so you know as much as you can. And Ben Franklin apparently was the one who said, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And this is one of the things that I distilled out of the papers that I wrote previously. The real purpose of QA is to assess the risk of shipping your product to your company. So you want to try as hard as possible to perceive the entire state of the app in a gestalt, where everything that you know about it, like this has to be fixed, this has to be fixed, that doesn't have to be fixed. And you can weigh the risk yourself because you've got that information. Apple ships apps with bugs all the time. You may choose to ship with some things that are known issues that you can address later, because shipping is paramount. You must ship on time. But the fact is, this is only risk minimization. It's going to happen. It's a big, ugly world out there. So we do very intensive exploratory testing. There have been a few proposed alternatives. So the first one is we have our developers do the testing. This is not super effective, and I'm going to go into why. And I'm talking about like ongoing testing, not the kind of indie work and then polish that I described previously. That is a craft. So first of all, regression testing. There's very poor system-wide regression testing from most developers. One of the examples I can give you is the unread counts in NetNewswire. Mess with those, and stuff breaks all over the place. You have to be ready to do an intensive scouring of the entire app. Very little off-nominal testing. Doing things like saying, okay, well, Sharif found one that just blew my mind. We had a search field for NetNewswire for Mac. In full screen mode, you do the search, it would do this pop-up, and then she'd switched out of full screen mode and just did all sorts of crazy stuff. And a lot of times you don't have time to just hunt around for things like that. Denial. A lot of people don't really want to look too closely at their work, and they just want to move on. But the other thing is, it's inefficient. So let's say that you have a developer doing testing. They're spending about a quarter of their time testing, 3/4 of their time doing development. You might think that would be worth about a quarter of a tester, but our CTO maintains that it's more like an eighth of a tester because they're just not as good and there's a lot of context switching that's going on. So what you really have, if you have 3 devs, you have 2 1/4 devs and 3/4 of a drunk tester. Just between the lack of experience and the context switching and that kind of thing. So you could look at hiring a 4th developer. You need more help, you need to get more work done. That would give you 3 solid devs and 1 drunk tester. Or instead of hiring another dev, you could have your 3 devs doing the work, and you could spend the money on a testing god, which is just going to be much, much better for you. They are going to be better at it than the devs are. So that's a recommendation, certainly what we did. So another one that comes up is, well, we just have a large beta testing community, and they test all of our stuff. That's fascinating. So this is not a bad model. But you do have a longer turnaround time for finding regressions, like I said, because the builds will go out. It's not like it's happening while it's in-house. And a lot of the testers have a lack of the insider's info on how things are supposed to work and that kind of thing. You get a lot of speculation about like what the cause might be. And they're not necessarily great bug reporters. You do get crash logs, and those are great, and those are useful. But it's largely limited to functional testing, which is going to get you in that first area I was describing. Now, if you have a very, very large beta tester, you're definitely going to get economies of scale, and you're going to find more of the edge cases. You're going to have users that have different needs or do things in different ways, and so that does help. But the other thing is it can be risky. If you dog food your user base too much, some of them, if they end up losing a lot of data or something, or it's just not stable, you may not want to stick with it. The other thing is it requires transparency. Even if you're doing a closed beta, if you are like Apple and you don't want to reveal anything about your apps until it's out in the wild, once you've actually handed this out to people, there's a very big risk that your competitors are going to know that you're working on this stuff, and you may not feel good with that level of transparency. However, beta testing is a phenomenal adjunct to internal testing. And we do it ourselves. And part of the reason we do it is that we just need to get more people on there, and we'll start getting crash logs that we weren't able to see internally, and we can start figuring those out. So that's definitely a step that we take before we ship. So I'm just about done, but the other thing is, the other alternative is just hubris. Some people think that they're too big to fail, and they think that they've never had a problem, so what they're doing is clearly working. And what I tend to think of is uninsured motorists, possibly uninsured drunk motorists, because a lot of these people are just lucky. We've done QA for people that have had a successful track record that have had appalling security breaches. Local data stored on the device, in the clear, sensitive information sent in the clear, like totally with their pants down. And the only reason that they're okay is that it didn't get exploited before it got fixed. And there are plenty of people. If you search on wallstreetjournal.com for data breach, you'll get a ton of stories of these giants who have just paid, a lick and a promise to the testing, and they have just appalling failures. And part of the reason I started writing this stuff was my credit card information got compromised, and I was like, come on, guys, just try a little. So As far as the big companies are concerned, one of my testers had asked me to include this comment, which influenced the start of this. Was, look on my works, ye mighty in despair. So she made me promise I would say that. So go hire a tester. Find a good one.